What is Imago Dei? Why are we speaking Latin? And what does it have to do with abuse in Christianity? More specifically, what does abuse in Christianity do to distort our view of ourselves, others, and even God himself? Imago Dei is Latin because people inside of Christianity have been talking about it for a really long time. Long enough that we are still using a dead language to describe this concept. Imago Dei literally means the image of God. It's commonly used to label the concept of what it means to be created in the image of God. All right, so where does the idea of being created in the image of God come from? Well, it comes from Moses. When Moses recorded Genesis, I don't think his usage of the word Imago Dei was accidental at all, because Imago Dei was being used in his day in a very specific way. Imago Dei, or image of God, was used in Moses' time for the kings, for royalty, as they elevated themselves above other people, above the people that they ruled. These now ancient monarchs were considered representatives of the gods that they worshipped. They were priest kings that ruled by divine right over other people. But Moses, he uses the term differently. He uses the term Imago Dei to describe everybody, every man and woman, not just a priestly line or a royal lineage. All of humanity, according to Genesis, was created by God to rule over creation for him. We are to rule on God's behalf over the earth. Genesis 1, 26-27. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth." So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them, male and female. Every man and woman, everyone with a human body, is included in this description. With some of God's nature imprinted upon us, it's very difficult to overstate human dignity. We contain a kind of humble godlikeness created out of dirt, but profoundly valuable. This elevates human value above that of animals, which are valuable in their own right, and ties our value directly to God. Yet, and this is important, Imago Dei also implies something else, that we're made in the image of God, but that we are not God. Imago Dei has implications for all kinds of modern controversies. Human sexuality, abortion, euthanasia. It really touches on a lot. And we need to apply Imago Dei to each of those issues. For us, though, we're going to focus on abuse, particularly abuse inside of Christianity. All right, we've already talked about our creation. We were created good. We were created in the image of God, but we have fallen. This is a part of the Christian story, and we have fallen a long way. This does not negate our Imago Dei, but it does mar it. It's like spray paint on the Mona Lisa. It's still the Mona Lisa. It's still a work of art. It's still a beautiful image, but it's been marred. It's been defaced. And in the same way, sin has marred and defaced our Imago Dei. We are distorted by our rebellion against the one we were created to image. All sin distorts our humanity. We become shriveled versions of the men and women we were created to be when we engage in malice, pride, arrogance, selfishness. We aren't what we were made to be. We aren't what we were supposed to be. There are two ways that we will apply Imago Dei to issues of abuse. I'm sure there's many, many other applications. One, the false God complex of the abuser. And secondly, inadequate valuing of the abused. All right, the false God complex. As we stated before, to be made in the image of God makes us profoundly valuable, but clearly not God. An abuser is someone who will, and there's so many different ways that this can happen, and it's not always obvious, but an abuser is somebody who will actually act as though they are God in somebody else's life. You will find that abusers are people who, in their own unique ways, demand a kind of subservience, maybe from an individual, maybe from a large group of people, but they're going to demand a subservience. They're going to demand a form of worship. In all cases, the abuser believes that the abused, be it one, be it many, exists for their pleasure. But We were created for God's pleasure, not just for one another's pleasure. Now, let's take a step back for self-reflection. When we act as though other people exist to serve us, we are walking the path of the abuser. When we leverage people for our own social status, when we steal their labor, when we co-opt their creativity, when we demand people bring us some form of service or pleasure, we're starting to become abusive. We are creating an oppressive force in their lives. And then if we punish, harm, manipulate people when they don't measure up to our unacceptable standards, that's us becoming abusive. And this is something we can all do, and we need to be careful because the abuser is not just a special category of person. An abuser could be any of us if we don't repent of our evil, if we don't repent of our sin. Now let's look at the inadequate valuing of the abused. It's really common that when a person has been treated as though they are lesser, other people will pick up on this and also treat them as though they were lesser. Consciously or unconsciously, entire families, communities, subcultures can find people that they just don't value like they value other people. People who don't play by the same rules or aren't quite as self-aware or just can't keep up in some certain way. Even leaders who should know better end up enforcing abuse when they treat the desires of some people as more important than the desires of somebody else. As if an abused person's effort, emotional energy, time, creativity, desires, ambitions aren't as important as somebody else's. Now, a person's shortcomings, and everyone has shortcomings, some people's are more obvious than others, but a person's shortcomings never means that they should be abused or oppressed. Using power, influence, authority as a way to control somebody is never okay, even if they have flaws, even if they have sins. At no point in the Bible, when it speaks on oppression, does it say the oppressed should be helped or defended if they are flawless or sinless. That's not in the Bible. We all have sins. We all have faults. If that was the standard, then no oppressed person would ever be helped anytime by God at any point. But that's not how it works, is it? We need to be careful to value people based on the way that God values people. And we do that by seeing how people are made in the image of God. Flawed people made in the image of God. Unpopular people made in the image of God. People who are socially more slow made in the image of God. People who have bad ideas made in the image of God. It doesn't matter how someone may irritate you or annoy you. There's never an excuse to have power, influence, or authority used to control somebody. Never. Now, we've been talking about how things go wrong. The big picture is we tarnish our own Imago Dei when we act in sin. When we give ourselves over to porn, sexual perversion, selfishness, these things distort our Imago Dei. So we should be repenting of those things. But we need help. This is not something we can do on our own. And the good news is we have someone who helps us. And Control Freak Christianity, we're going to talk about the Christ. We're talking about Jesus here. He's the one that helps. We cannot have any real restoration of Imago Dei apart from Jesus. And anyone who tells you otherwise, they're lying. Don't believe them. Where we have failed, particularly with sin and imaging God, Jesus has succeeded. Where we have gone wrong, he does what is right. Unlike Adam, Jesus was obedient. Unlike Cain, Jesus never harmed somebody unjustly. And on the comparison goes. Wherever we've gone wrong with our humanity, Jesus did it right. And he came as a human to live as humanity should. And he shows us how to fulfill, how to live out our Imago Dei. But look also at how Jesus treated people. He spent time talking to children and blind men that others did not want to spend time on. He touched lepers and unclean women. He demonstrated over and over the dignity of the people he came across. Even Jesus' intensity in his conflicts with self-righteous religious leaders was a call for them to repent from their self-righteousness and trust God. It was also a call for them to treat people differently. And that's a call that we can all listen to. If you have been abused or mistreated, look to Jesus. He himself was abused and mistreated. He does not overlook you, and he cares for you. Jesus sees you and remembers your dignity. If you have abused and mistreated others, look to Jesus. He calls you to repent, trust him, and treat people differently. Have you seen people abused and mistreated? Look at Jesus and see how he doesn't ignore the easy to ignore people. Whatever our situation, we were created as royalty. We were created to image God and to rule whatever part of the world we've come to influence. We don't have to pretend that we've done this well. In fact, admitting that Jesus is the only perfect image of God frees us to admit our failure and to go to him for help so that we can change and grow. Seeing that Jesus is the only perfect image of God frees us to admit our own need of growth and healing. So let us grow individually, but let us also grow as communities, that we would see the nobility of humanity and highly value one another. Like Jesus, let's see the value of people that most others would tend to undervalue. We should never, ever allow in our midst people to be manipulated, dominated, or devalued. So let our love for one another be courageous. And it'll have to be if we're going to do this. And finally, let us remember Jesus, the perfect image of God. He is making all things new. All of God's people are a part of a new, restored creation. He's remaking us in his image once again. Jesus, the perfect image of God, and also the perfect imprint of the nature of God. He is returning, and all the dehumanizing is going to come to an end. So Jesus, come quickly. We don't think we've actually talked enough about Jesus. So click this video here and we have a little bit more for you.